Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Microsoft Surface 2 and the Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition. Now, both of these tablets are fairly new. The Note 10.1 launched back on October 14th, whereas the Surface 2 just launched on the 22nd of October. Pricing also similar. You're looking at the 32 gig capacity right here of the Surface 2, which is priced at $450. You can pick up a 64 gig capacity for $550. On the right with the Note 10.1, you're looking at a 32 gig right here, which is priced at $600. You can also pick up the 16 gigabyte for $550. So the Note 10.1 is the more expensive tablet, arguably because it has more hardware, which I'll get to through the course of this video as I go through specifications and really talk about which tablet is right for you in terms of what you actually need to get out of your tablet experience. So pricing relatively close. Hardware also, both tablets have top tier specifications. I'll start off with the screens because that's one of the biggest points of interest for any tablet purchase these days. Basically what you're looking at here are two of the best screens that I've seen from any tablet manufacturer. In terms of resolution on the Note 10.1, you've got 2560 by 1600 resolution. This is a clear type LCD panel. So really, in terms of color accuracy, viewing angles, top tier, no question about it. Even though it shares the same resolution with the Nexus 10, which Samsung also manufactures, which is an older tablet at this point, but still arguably one of the best values in the 10-inch space, there's no question this screen outdoes it when it comes to, again, the color saturation and overall accuracy and viewing angles. Just everything about it is better. Is it necessarily worth the price premium? No, that's not what I'm speaking to. But when you're looking apples to apples at two screens with the same resolution manufactured both by Samsung, this screen is the winner. So in the current crop of tablets, especially the latest, which is what we're looking at right here, in my opinion, the Note 10.1 does have the best display. Over here on the left, though, with the Surface 2, don't in any way for a moment begin to think that you're taking a true backseat, because even though this only has a 1080p display, it's actually, at least in my experience, better than the display found on the brand new Surface Pro 2. So go figure, even though Microsoft really is all about making a reference piece of hardware that is the best of the best for the Windows experience, somehow the dumbed down RT version of their tablet line has gotten the better screen. Now, maybe that's just in the samples that I have, but either way, the benefit really is to Surface 2. That is the story at the end of the day, because the original Surface RT, and by the way, the RT brand has been dropped from at least the name, but the operating system is still Windows 8.1 RT, which is what it runs out of the box. And I have to say, it's a great facelift for 8.1, especially for users that are very accustomed to Windows 7 and are just getting their feet wet with the operating system and didn't really want to have to learn anything about Windows 8. They've reincorporated the Start button. I'll get to that a little bit later. But the 1080p resolution, which is a big bump up from last year's model, again, also clear type, really one of the best in the business. And overall build quality, again, is just superb, and the screen speaks to that. So while it doesn't have the resolution, color saturation, and overall pop that you get from the Note 10.1, it actually does have better viewing angles. Had this tablet, the Surface 2, had the same resolution as the Samsung, I probably would believe, based on my experience, that the Surface 2 and Microsoft build would deliver a better viewing experience. But since it doesn't, the Note 10.1 still takes the better screen, at least in this matchup, award. Moving away from the screen, they both have top-tier processors. We're looking at ARM A15 architecture in both of these. The Note 10.1 has Samsung's very own Exynos 5, one of the top performers out there right now. They did not utilize that in their Note 3 line of phones. They did go with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 Pro, which really is arguably, again, one of the top tier, if not the best performer in the business right now. I think that was more a matter of sourcing and margins, and I'm not going to get into Samsung's business model, but it came down to supply and demand and knowing where they needed volume, let's put it that way. And they're going to sell a lot more Note 3s than they are Note 10.1. So they didn't really skimp here by using the Exynos 5. In fact, it also has a companion secondary quad-core processor that is an A7, which is for the low-powered activities that don't require the full strength of the Exynos 5. So top-tier processor. You've also got 3 gigs of RAM here to complement it. So very potent. In fact, highest in terms of or beefiest specifications you're going to find on any tablet in the market with any operating system. Of course, this is all driven by Android Jelly Bean 4.3, which has been overlaid with Samsung's TouchWiz. You can see that in things like the notification menu. We have quick access to a wide variety of different controls without having to dive into settings, which is then customized even further. Not going to get into that right now. Over back to the left to the Surface 2, we've got another top-tier processor, the NVIDIA Tegra 4, which also benchmarks right up there in line with the Exynos 5, in fact beating it. They all kind of exchange roles, again, including the Snapdragon 800. So these are the best mobile processors in the business that money can buy. So you don't have to worry purchasing any of these tablets that you're getting old hardware. And that often is a concern because companies don't generally have your best interest at heart when they put together these pricey, pretty packages. But in this case, you're safe, at least on that front. 2 gigs of RAM complements that Tegra 4. And I have to say, the Tegra 4 really is a beast of a chip. In fact, I can argue on many instances when I match these up, and you'll see in some of this review/demo, that the Tegra 4 does seem to be a smoother overall experience. Now, some of that can be chalked up to the fact that RT may be, I won't say a little bit more optimized. It is. I mean, NVIDIA was the direct partner for this entire program for the development of RT. So there's no question we have a tablet really built from the ground up, a piece of software to match. Whereas with Android, we have a one-size-fits-all that, yes, has been refined for the tablet and phone experience, but it is one-size-fits-all. RT, on the other hand, or now just Surface 2, but still the OS itself, really is designed from the ground up to give you the best possible experience. And it isn't a one-size-fits-all. You're looking at the only size as far as Microsoft is concerned. Granted, there were other tablets in the past, not going to be so many in the future, more Pro-style version ones that will run Bay Trail, full versions of Windows 8.1, again, with much less low-powered processors, not mobile processors, though. But sticking to what else you've got here. In terms of Wi-Fi capability, and by the way, the difference between the 2 and 3 gigs of RAM is negligible. Both of these devices are multitasking beasts. But what they can actually do because of software differences makes them, again, potentially different, even though they both are targeted at very similar customers, both students and business professionals alike. In terms, I've covered the screen, processors, RAM. In terms of internal storage, I mentioned before, 32 and 64 options here, 16 and 32 on the right, but both do have micro SD card slots for storage expansion. In terms of weight, the Surface 2 is 1.5 pounds, 1.4, slightly thinner than the original RT. Another improvement. Basically everything has been improved on the Surface 2 compared to last gen. The Note 10.1 is significantly lighter, despite almost being the exact same form factor. But because the Surface 2 does have that kickstand with dual modes, which I'll be showing in a moment as well, that really does kind of render the weight difference a moot point, in my opinion. Moving away from the actual weight of the tablet, in terms of Wi-Fi performance, both have dual band, which is a very good thing, but the Note 10.1 does have AC connectivity, which is next-gen Wi-Fi. So in terms of performance, I haven't seen anything faster than the Note 10.1 2014. That's not to say that the Surface 2 doesn't have incredible Wi-Fi performance as well. It does. That will be demonstrated through the course of this video. So with that said, let me bring up a web browser as I continue to tell all of you about what these tablets can do. Both have Bluetooth 4.0. Unfortunately, USB 2.0 connectivity with the Note 10.1. That's probably the one area of contention I would push with that tablet, considering its high range of specifications. The Surface 2 does not suffer from that limitation. As I mentioned, micro SD card slots on both. Expansion tops out at 64 gigs. So I don't know if firmware will eventually allow for updating beyond that when we see capacities at affordable rates that, again, are in that same range. Let's go ahead and simultaneously jump to CNN. And you'll see that the RT-based OS, again here on Surface 2, did seem to beat out, in my opinion, the experience that we have with the stock WebKit browser that Samsung has customized for the TouchWiz experience. And I do chalk that up to the fact that the TouchWiz experience, yes, it does create some lag, there's no question about it. And as I mentioned before, you have two completely different environments here. And that really does make a big difference for overall performance. I wouldn't argue it otherwise. Of course, if I was comparing the exact same operating systems, it would make a big difference, but that isn't the case. Close to touching the same time. But even if I don't get it exactly on the money, I can assure you that the performance overall generally tends to favor the Windows-based tablet. Also, clearly, if you're accustomed to using Windows at the office regularly, and I know many of you are accustomed to using Android regularly on a personal level with your smartphone. In fact, that's the whole idea of Samsung branding all of their tablets to basically match their phone counterparts, whether it's a Note or traditional Galaxy phone. The idea is to have that familiarity. Well, that's the exact thing that Microsoft is betting on. They're hoping that you're going to like that this looks and feels exactly like your desktop or Ultrabook or Surface Pro 2, but you get the battery life that you get with its competitors from iOS and Android. You also get the form factor, the screen resolution, the front-facing webcam, rear webcam. I mean, you get all of these things that you expect from top-tier tablets, where Microsoft, quite frankly, has been vacant from the scene completely. So in terms of Wi-Fi performance, they are relatively close. I'm going to go to ESPN, bring that up for you. And I do really like both of these tablets a lot, if that hasn't come across quite clearly in the course of my coverage of both. Again, you can see it just seems like we're loading up more quickly on the Windows-based device. And that's not something I'm pitching, it's the truth. The other big difference is, of course, Flash. That's something that comes with a Windows environment. There's no one using a Windows computer that is wondering whether or not they will have Flash. Now, Android's big selling point, at least at inception, one of them was Flash capability, which was eventually abandoned in favor of HTML5. That's why you see right here, it's not on the tablet stock out of the box. Of course, you can sideload Flash. I've mentioned this before in my coverage of just about every Android device, and that's still true. Android is all about flexibility. You have a lot of it, even here in the Note 10, as heavily coded as it is with TouchWiz. So it can be sideloaded, but the point is a lot of people go by stock. What are you getting out of the box? Most people don't want to customize, folks. They're not like necessarily myself. They don't want to get too deep into the product. They just want something that works. In fact, that's why Apple has had such success. You can see sometimes I'm swiping on the Note, and maybe it's just that I'm missing the actual areas of the screen that are activated to pick up swipe, but it just seems like the Microsoft experience here on the left overall does deliver in a way that I haven't seen from anyone, including Apple. I only would say that they're like Apple in terms of perfecting their product for themselves. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of computer manufacturers didn't want to jump into a battle with Microsoft making their own reference hardware, which was really understandable. Android doesn't suffer from that problem. Again, it's a one-size-fits-all solution. Samsung just happens to be the best at that sizing, at least thus far, when it comes to tablet sales in particular, as well as phones. But overall, I like both of these. So Wi-Fi performance is on par. Battery life also very close, very, very similar. You're looking at, with the Note 10.1, anywhere between 8 and 10 hours, depending on how far you push it, what your screen brightness is at, what are you doing with notifications. All of these things have to be taken into account. Surface 2, about the same. You're looking at roughly 8 hours. Again, depending on what you're doing, how hard you're pressing it. If you're using auto brightness, you can get more. The Note is going to outlast it, at least in my tests so far, but the Surface 2 recharges much more quickly, whereas the Note 10.1 takes incredibly long to charge. So that's another thing to take into account. Now, all of these things that I've been mentioning about specifications, I haven't talked about the actual webcams. I'm going to do that right now. But then I want to talk about, moving away from specifications, experience, and really that does decide which is correct for you. In terms of front-facing and rear cameras, there's no question that Samsung's two 1.9 megapixel front-facing and 8 megapixel rear are some of the best cameras in class. You've also got an LED flash on the back of this tablet, and it really does have an incredible profile. They've redesigned the actual build, no more shiny plastic. We have a almost matte-like finish, faux leather with stitching around it. There's your 8 megapixel shooter with LED flash, 1080p video capture. Unfortunately, no 4K like the Note 3. Your micro USB charging port right there. You can see we've got this almost aluminum but metallic-like finish around the edge. Just gives a more premium feel. Your speaker grill right there on the left-hand side, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Your power button right there on the upper right corner, flanked by the volume rocker. Your infrared port, another thing you're not going to find on any of Microsoft's tablets. This is to use this tablet, which is, by the way, this feature is on every Samsung product, as a universal remote control. An added value, but certainly speaks to this tablet being more of a toy than a productivity machine. But I assure you, it's not a toy. That's the only thing it really shares in common, and by that I mean the IR port, with really all the other Samsung tablets out there, because this is a beast in every single way, whether we're talking about processor, RAM, resolution on that display, the pen input. It's unlike any of Samsung's other tablets. This is the top tier. And then on the other side, the right side, we've got our micro SD card slot for storage expansion, again up to 64 gigs, and then another speaker. Stereo sound on this is pretty solid. I would say the Surface 2 and this are on about par with one another. A little bit louder performance from the Samsung. And then, of course, our S Pen. And I'm going to talk about that right now because you just don't have that on the Surface. You have it on the Surface Pro experience, but you don't have it on the Surface 2. So basically, and you can get a stylus, don't misunderstand, but this comes with this out of the box. Part of what you're paying more for is that Wacom digitizer screen, and Air Command is part of the software development that Samsung has invested their money in. You've got this out of the box. It allows you to use the pen window feature, which will let you draw a box anywhere on screen and then instantly open up a browser or whatever you can select from that screen. You saw it was a limited bunch of applications, but open it in that spot. You just have to hit the button on the S Pen. It'll bring up the Air Command again. You can open up another window. I've already demoed this before. It works really well. It's a novel thing, very simple, but sometimes the simple things are the best ones. Of course, you can move that around. Everything's very fluid here. You're not going to see it miss a beat in that regard. Back to the other features, and I'm only showing these because they just don't exist in the other environment, and people are going to be interested, obviously, in what they're missing. This is all about a comparison. S-Finder allows you to go through content on your machine. Not really going to feature too much on that, but it is a convenient tool once you've got a lot of content, audio, video, ebooks, pictures, all stored on your tablet, SD card, whatever it may be. ScreenWrite does exactly what it sounds like. You can see we've just now brought up an entire window that's going to allow us to actually draw on the screen, make notes, whatever it is. We can now do it. Again, you have pressure sensitivity, ability to select different writing tools, brushes, whatever it may be, highlighters. You can control just about everything you want. So for the artist, graphic designer, this S Pen experience really is above and beyond what you'd ever expect, let alone from an Android tablet. And that's why Samsung has done so well with this product in first gen, and now, in my opinion, here in the second gen, things have only gotten better. You can cancel that, share it, save it, whatever it may be. In my opinion, not worth saving in this case. Moving right along in terms of other features, again, all S Pen added bonus features here. We also have the Scrapbook application. Not going to jump into that, but essentially it allows you to use the S Pen to grab things, cut them out, and scrapbook just as you would imagine. And then finally the Action Memo, which when we used to pull out an S Pen with the Note 2 or the original Note 10.1, We would always have access to a quick memo pad. Again, they're explaining hand holding, something done by Samsung. Microsoft has done a little bit of this with Windows 8.1 and Surface RT with Surface 2, but just explaining exactly what you can really do with linking memos, which is pretty cool. But again, it works the same way. You can select what you want to actually use in terms of color, but this is much simpler than the screen write or anything that is really about becoming an artist. This is literally just a memo pad. So that rounds out the features of Air Command, but then you've also got multi-window. I'll continue to use the S Pen for that. And you can see the little tab right there on the left. And this is where multitasking really comes to life with this tablet. You can go ahead and just open up a web browser, and then go ahead and open up another web browser, and then just continue to go to town. You want some music. And you can keep opening these things up, and they're all there in the background. You can adjust the screen so that your focus is where you want it to be. And this is where the tablet really just starts to fly and do things that make it seem like a computer. And that's where, tablet manufacturers have all been trying to do this. Who can make the tablet that's going to really be able to replace the PC and bring it in at a price point that makes it so attractive that you will be willing to abandon it? Well, with that said, I'm going to put this down for a moment. I've talked about just about everything you need to know with this tablet. The S Pen, a great feature, no question whatsoever, and the Wacom Digitizer really just shines. Cameras, I just mentioned before, also great, some of the best you're going to get from a tablet. Build quality overall, nowhere near what you're going to find in the Surface 2. Now, that's not because Samsung doesn't do a good job with their tablets, but there's a reason they revamped the design from the original Note 10, and that's because the all-plastic simply took away and really didn't help justify the very high price point that Samsung was bringing to the table. By the way, I want to point out both of these tablets do have Bluetooth 4.0. For those of you curious, after all, what would these high-end tablets be without the ability to wirelessly connect to Bluetooth-driven devices, all sorts of different peripherals? Also, using their USB USB ports, you can hook up different kinds of jump drives, hard drives, but that's where Windows is going to be the better device than the Samsung Android-driven product, and that's because it is, after all, a computer-esque tablet rather than a tablet trying to be a computer, and that's because of the lineage in Windows. So I've spoken a lot about the Note 10.1 and how all those specs come together to really create a great product that I think most users are very happy with out of the box. Doesn't require too much tinkering. When it comes to Surface 2, the same can be said. The real big difference here is that while we've got all this great hardware, we unfortunately don't have all of the software to match. Now, many can argue because you can jump into desktop mode and simply from there pull up a full version of Internet Explorer, which gives you all of the capability of a real desktop computer in a tablet form, something that can't be done over here on the right or with any other Android tablet or, of course, Apple's offerings. You now really render the entire purpose of applications useless. But of course, the argument for having apps is ease of use, how quickly you can get that information, and it's always going to be slower to actually have to type in. And here you really do have to type in, because unless you have a keyboard paired up or a touch or type cover, which are great accessories, the revamp, very strong with putting backlighting in there, that in itself warrants an upgrade, in my opinion, even for the older generation, people who are using, by that I mean people who have last-gen hardware, the Surface Pro or the Surface RT. It's worth getting the new type and touch covers just for the backlighting. But in this case, because we're in the full browser in desktop mode, it's going to be just like it would on a desktop Windows 8.1 computer. You have to pull up the keyboard, type in the website you want to go to. It's just not going to be as intuitive because it expects you to be using a hard keyboard. That's just a fact of life here with this experience. But you can see it's really fast, and I mean almost no buffering whatsoever for the page. I'm nowhere near my router, and this is performance that includes the flash, includes just everything that you expect from your traditional desktop. So for people who've always been put off by tablets that are compromises, Even though many think that Windows RT was a dead-on arrival concept and that it was the biggest compromise of all, they were wrong. It was really just truly a matter of time of getting those applications. Now, they're up to 100,000 apps in the App Store. And is it enough? No, it's not, because even simple apps like Instagram still don't live in this environment. I mean, Facebook just got added. There are other apps that recently have made their way. But the reality is that if all you're going to judge a tablet by is its application store, then clearly there's a reason this is going to be your last option between Apple and Androids, simply because you're not going to have access to all of the software you'd like to have. But if you really are looking for what this tablet has out of the box as a productivity-driven consumer, a professional who needs a uniform experience to what they get out of Windows at the office, because most people do work with Windows at the office, even if they personally use a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, whatever it may be that is Apple-based, where they're not working in a Windows 7 or 8.1 environment. The point is that the majority do still have to work with 8.1. So there isn't going to be as much of a learning curve. Of course, Windows 8.1 is still getting adopted. Most offices still aren't working there, but eventually the future, the concept is pretty clear that it will catch up, and so will the tablets. It'll be second nature, essentially, to work with this OS. Of course, it's limited only to the mobile applications, which is the biggest drawback, but the environment, the way things work, the familiarity of not having to learn a new OS is a big advantage. How smooth it operates, the quality of the hardware. I do grant most of the operating capability to the Tegra 4. It's an incredible processor. Everything that I've seen that actually sports it does run just like fire. It's very hard to make it lag. It really just eats everything up, and that's why it does so well with a piece of software that has been built for it. NVIDIA very close with Microsoft on this build. In fact, that's part of the reason, in my opinion, they lost the contract with Google for Nexus devices. They started off with the first Google-driven tablet in the Zoom and followed suit thereafter in Nexus devices. But now, ever since the first Surface, we've had that shift. So unfortunately, NVIDIA is still making Tegra 4s, of course, are still in Android-driven products, the Shield as well as Toshiba's tablets, and I believe some others, I think Dell, but we're not seeing as much of it as we used to. They used to dominate that market. That dominance has come here to Windows. Every app works as it should. The included value of getting with basically all of the multitasking capability, which you just saw I was swiping through, that's just part of Windows 8. You do get the full Office suite, which I haven't mentioned yet, and that's a tremendous value for anyone who's looking to do productivity, because to have Outlook, to have Windows, Word, I'm opening all of these simultaneously. Excel, PowerPoint, just pushing it to see how much the Tegra 4 can really handle. And then lastly, OneNote. So I've got them all open right now. I mean, that's really impressive to be able to have all of these simultaneously open. And even though they're not exactly one-for-one, complete copies of the desktop versions of these programs, they still give you just about all of the capability that the desktop versions do. And no other tablet on the market can do that. We knew Microsoft had this in their back pocket all along. If a tablet was going to try to be like a computer, it had to have the capability of a computer. So here we have it in RT. It's just a matter still of that application store growing. So for the person that has to have the latest applications that are blooming in the most popular OSs right now, like iOS and Android, that still isn't going to be found here. But for that complete PC-driven customer, there hasn't been an offering until this. In my opinion, the first RT tablet was an attempt, but because the specifications should have been what we see here, we got old hardware there in a Tegra 3 that was a year old already, coming out in a tablet that represented the greatest that Microsoft could offer, the first tablet. That was disappointing in itself. And then not to get a 1080p resolution display, well, you have that here now. So you do really have a lot of great things. The webcams Not as good as the Note 10.1, but that's because Samsung's got a lot of work in this business, and they even make their own sensors, so that's a big advantage. But they are a tremendous upgrade from the RT. You've got a front-facing cam that's capable of 3.5 megapixel stills, good for video conferencing in my experience so far. A year of Skype comes with this with free calling to landlines, so that's a huge, another built-in value. And don't kid yourself, Samsung also prides themselves on the built-in value. They're all about that they're giving you $600 in combination of Play Store credit, their own hub credit, as well as subscriptions to the New York Times, Bloomberg, Business Week, all of those things. Here you're getting Skype and Office. Those are the built-in values, really. In terms of hardware, though, the build quality is just stupendous. The accessories definitely far exceed the value of those made for the Note. I mean, the smart covers are, pretty much garbage compared to the Type and Touch covers, especially, as I mentioned, revamped with backlighting now. They really replace or really complete the tablet package to turn it into a computer, just short of what Asus does with the Transformers, and in a much slimmer, compact form factor. So you've got that port right there for that connection. The Kickstand, something completely vacant for most tablets that I really love. It's something I enjoyed on some of the first smartphones I used, and unfortunately more manufacturers don't incorporate. We now have two different modes. So you've got further range of motion. They've taken a good concept, made it better. Build quality, this isn't flimsy. Everything here is made of a material very similar to a magnesium alloy that Microsoft has patented themselves, another smart move. Their rear camera rated at 5 megapixels, yet another big upgrade. They all perform well, all being the cameras. On the left-hand side of the tablet, we've got one of the two stereo speakers, as I mentioned before, volume output just about on par with the Samsung, a little bit louder from Sammy, but I'll chalk that up to the lineage in the business. 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, your volume rocker, of course, as I mentioned, the kickstand, which does have a ridge right here. It's the access point is in the exact same location on both the Surface and the Surface 2, as well as the Surface Pro 2. If I flip the tablet around onto the top, this would be the top right side. We've got the power button. And then if I go to, confusing myself there for a moment, over to the right side, which I haven't covered yet, we've got some of the most important action going on here. A Pogo charging port. The pen can attach here as well. The one from the Pro, however, does not work with this tablet. At least I haven't gotten it to work thus far. USB 3.0 port, which is one of the big enhancements. Again, speaking to the fact that we're dealing with a piece of computer hardware, the fact that they're aware that they needed to upgrade that in a tablet form is important. I think Asus is the only other tablet manufacturer right now making tablets with USB 3.0 ports, which kind of makes me scratch my head. Then we've got our micro HDMI out. Surface Pro 2 has Displayport. This is another enhancement, in my opinion. Certainly, it has to leave more room for other components inside, which is part of the reason this tablet got thinner and lighter, not just because of that, but overall rethinking design. And then the other stereo speaker grill. And that pretty much is it. You know, we've got a hardware button here, the Windows home button, which flips you in and out of screens. Let's get the screen orientation back to where it should be. And it works fairly quickly, as you may have noticed. I mean, this tablet really does just chew up multitasking, and that's what's similar about this one. It also has absolutely no problem multitasking. You can see we've got a decent amount of stuff here open. On both of these, I've yet to hit the wall for where basically the tablet gives up, cries, and says, I cannot handle the amount of tabs, applications that you're running. Granted, I can run a lot more applications with the Note than I can here with the Surface 2, just because there aren't as many applications that I use regularly. But when it comes to internet browsing, looking at your pictures, sharing your content, dealing with Flash, this tablet still does incredibly well. The desktop experience, as I mentioned before, is true to what you'd get out of a computer. You just can't take it to the next level, which I don't see as a very big limitation, considering this is a tablet. Need I remind everyone who's watching this very long comparison, because this tablet really does accomplish, in my opinion, the best attempt at trying to pull off traditional computing in a tablet form. The Note, on the other hand, it's really all about the S Pen. It's about getting that incredibly high resolution screen, a lighter package, better cameras, and better specifications. But at the end of the day, what really has to determine whether you're a student, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, or just a professional looking for productivity, which of these devices you're going to end up going with, it's really going to come down to the operating system. If the confines of Windows RT, where it's at presently with its 100,000 applications, doesn't bother you, and you can really do everything that you need to do, you need to have Office, as well as the ability to have a Flash web browser. You get included SkyDrive, at least for, I believe, it's either 1 or 2 years out of the box. But if that's another cloud service, if you depend on cloud services in general, not to say that you can't do that with Android, this is a great tablet for you, especially if you're already into the Microsoft ecosystem. And believe it or not, I know a lot of consumers that still are. And that's exactly why Microsoft started out eventually making a tablet and has stuck with it despite the terrible sales of RT. So everything here is really good in Surface 2. The price point could be even better, arguably, for all tablets all the time. People are going to think this is expensive, as well as the Note 10. They both are, but they both bring some of the best hardware in the business. Now, if you can't live within the confines of RT, and you absolutely have to have the S Pen, you're looking at the best tablet ever made right now, in my opinion. Will that change as more things come out? Of course. New processors, new screen types. I mean, I wish this had been a Super AMOLED. There are a million things you can add to your list of wishes in new hardware. But when it comes to what exists in the marketplace right now, the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 represents the best of everything. People who complain about lag simply do not understand that TouchWiz is a hog, there's no question about it, but it's also one of the most polished interfaces you're going to find. You get the added value of everything the S Pen brings to the table, which in my opinion is more than the pen integration you're going to get out of Surface Pro 2. And that's simply because there's more optimization. By that, I mean actual software written into the tablet out of the box for you to use with the pen. Because the average user, yes, they're going to know to seek out applications they can use with their pen in something like the Surface Pro 2, but that's not every consumer. That's a niche consumer. The average consumer wants to be able to take notes. They want to be able to quickly edit, share media, and just use this as another way to interact with their device. That's what Samsung has gotten right. This tablet performs incredibly well and really is, as I've mentioned, best in class. But Android right now, much like iOS, represents a much broader capability when it comes to applications and what you can actually do with your tablet. From novel to productive to entertainment, Android rules the roast between these two. But with that said, both are great pieces of hardware. Both brand new, so they're going to be in the market for a long time. Of course, sales will come and go. One thing I can assure you folks, as long as you understand everything I've presented in this video about specification and overall performance and the operating systems themselves, you will not be disappointed with either of these because they're both great tablets despite their at least high price points at launch. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.